law. As many of you know, Zero Hunger by 2030 is one of 17 Sustainable Development Goals established by the United Nations in 2015 as part of their 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. I'm pleased to report that a lot of positive collaborations and discussions, international decisions have happened since that time, including some big news coming out of the Biden administration and the United Nations Climate Conference, or COP26. In November, the U.S. and the EU announced a global partnership to cut methane emissions by 30% by 2030. That's compared to 2020 levels. More than 100 countries signed in. But even though there's a lot of interest and ambitions toward advancing sustainable agriculture, we all know that when you have ambitious goals, sometimes there's gaps in the roadmaps to reach them. And there could be some key events that happen that you hadn't expected. Take, for example, the folks at the Federal Reserve who last year decided that inflation was transitory. Well, that was last year. This year, we've decided that there's a general agreement, at least, that it's here to stay for a little bit and action is desperately needed to address it. As we've reported in AgriPulse recently, the UN Food and Agricultural Organization said that food inflation and food prices caused an increase of nearly 13% in March. That's the highest level ever recorded since the start of the monthly price index in 1990. Grain prices, for those of you who are feeding livestock, grain prices increased 17% in March. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen has said that the war on Ukraine, another thing that maybe we might not have anticipated, but it's here in a very big way. As you know, Ukraine is a global supplier of grains and oilseeds. She's said that this has already made a dire situation worse. And she's calling on all sorts of international organizations to come together and try to address this impact of food price spikes. David Malpass, the head of the World Bank, also warned about the possibility of a global food crisis. And one of the things that he said that I thought was most meaningful is that a typical poor family spends as much as 2/3 of their income on food. And estimates show that for each 1% increase in food prices, 10 million people may be thrown into extreme poverty. So when you think about that, we're in the middle of a lot of turmoil. How do we still stay focused on reaching these goals? They're very ambitious in our plans to address not only hunger, but climate change. So for today, I suggest that one of the ways we do that is by having these kinds of discussions and dialogues and keep trying to identify how we can move forward. If there are bumps in the path, then how do we either get around them or overcome them in other ways, address them through the regulatory process. So today we got a great lineup of speakers, and I am very excited to be your moderator for the afternoon. I am also going to apologize in advance in that I love the trees in Washington, D.C., but their pollen does not like me. So I have a steady supply of cough drops up here and water that I may be relying on. Hopefully I won't have to have too many Rubio moments, but it may happen. To start our conversation today, I'd like to invite Constance Coleman to come up. Constance is the president and CEO of the American Feed Industry Association. She's somebody who's got a lot of experience on the international and regulatory fronts. And prior to her current job, she was the CEO of the Farm Foundation, where she and I spent a lot of time collaborating and doing various conversations like this. So please welcome Constance Coleman.
Thank you, Sarah.
So let's start out. You represent the Feed Industry Association. Tell us how you view all of these different events right now from your viewpoint.
Right. Well, it's an interesting time to be in the animal food industry, Sarah, and a really interesting time, of course, just to be in food and agriculture. So we have been dealing with a lot of changes, and you highlighted several of those. We've had supply chain issues, we've had labor issues that resulted from COVID. We then had the Russia invasion of Ukraine. And against all of that has been this backdrop about sustainability and the discussion of sustainability, both at of course, at a domestic level. We've focused on sustainability for several decades now in the U.S. food and ag sector, but it's really it's taken center stage globally as well. And we really saw that come to fruition with the UN Food Systems Summit this past year. We pulled together a large group of the food and ag sector to get together and say, what's at the core of what's really important to us from a sustainability perspective? And it came down to support for innovation, diverse diets, and diverse production systems. And those are the things that I keep hearing, Sarah, resonating all the time when we talk about sustainability. But I was so happy that the U.S. government came forward and said, and yes, we need productivity growth. And that was a game changer in the international conversation, because prior to that, we saw a lot of things like the EU Farm to Fork initiative and others where it was really talking about taking tools away from food and agriculture in the name of sustainability without necessarily recognizing how important it is to have a really full toolbox to be able to achieve what we want to in such complex ecosystems. So this is the kind of the environment we're working in right now. And right now, I can tell you that animal food manufacturers are working every day to try to come up with innovations and tools that allow us to meet some of the very ambitious goals that we've set for ourselves and have been set for us. You mentioned the EU-US methane reduction agreement, 30%. That's not just going to happen with our current set of tools that are available to farmers. And you know, farmers work hard for us every day. We need to work hard for them too. And to do that, we need to be able to bring forward these innovations, need to be able to address everything about some of the evolving nutrition that we see in livestock. We have, we're going to hear a little bit more about just one example of an incredible tool that offers so much potential for the dairy and sector and anything actually ruminant-wise from this just one particular tool. And there's lots of those that are out there. And one of the things that I really find frustrating is you can walk into a supplier in Europe, you can walk into suppliers in other parts of the world and be able to get a product that is a feed ingredient, can go into a ruminant, and have claims associated with that. You can pick up a product in Europe that says, if a farmer feeds this to his dairy cattle, it can reduce methane by this much. We can't do that here in the U.S. And that's frustrating. Right now, we're missing out on so many innovations and so much of a competitive advantage with the rest of the world because we have a policy that was established in 1998 regulating animal feed and feed ingredients. Now, I don't know, when I go in for surgery, I don't want my doctor to be using a medical handbook from 1998, right. And we shouldn't be doing that with regulations for animal nutrition either. Just the other day, or not too long ago, Senator Tammy Baldwin made the comment that other countries will be using these emission reduction technologies 4 or 5 years earlier than we will in the U.S., and that's putting us at a big disadvantage. We have opportunities to put to address animal well-being, help the U.S. achieve some of those policy goals, address the overall health of the animal, and these are the kinds of things that when we take a look at that big sustainability objective, the meat sector, we're engaging with them with North American Meat Institute on the Protein Pact, fabulous goals and efforts, and we can do them. And that's what's exciting. We can do this, but we can't do this if we can't get those tools in there. So one of the things that we're really asking for is for FDA to modernize its regulatory program. So we are seeking that they just update their policy. So I'm going to give you some numbers, but it's not the one you think. the ones you think, Sarah. The Policy and Procedures Manual Guide 1240.3605. Write that down, 1240.3605. Let's modernize that. Let's update that policy that allow us to be able to bring products to the market that are feed ingredient and be regulated as food rather than drugs. Not go through that costly process and that lengthy process of doing that. And establish a clear policy position on products where the sole mode of action is in the digesta. That's kind of the definition of food. And where's that enteric methane being developed? In the rumen. So that's pretty exciting. And then harmonize it with some of these other developing countries that have these products out there so we can actually share these technologies across. And we also would love to see the U.S. Department of Natural Resource Conservation Service leverage some of the existing research around emission reduction technologies to integrate them into incentive programs for farmers and be able to take advantage of some of the carbon sequestration and credit trading that's out there.
So do you think it would be safe to say from your comments that FDA needs a little work on modernization?
They do. You know, when you look at the Center for Vet Med, they do a great job. They're a good group of folks, and they're working hard to do it. But it's 1998. Yeah, they definitely need to modernize and keep up with these innovations that are out there. It's woefully antiquated right now, and it's woefully underfunded. They don't have the resources. We've asked for $1 million. It just passed. Well, we asked for more. We got $1 million in this recent appropriations bill, but we're asking for $5 million more, and they probably could use another $10 million.
Wow. Well, Constance, I know you're going to be coming up later as part of our panel, so thank you for kicking us off with that overview.
Yes. Thanks.
Thanks. So next up, we'll have Jeff Simmons and Ivo. So there he is. Okay. Ivo Landsbergen, come up and join me here. Take the next couple seats. I don't know that if either of these gentlemen need much introduction to our audience. Jeff is the president and CEO of Elanco Animal Health. Jeff is the head of Elanco for the past decade. Simmons has directed the company's transformation and growth into a premier global player with a diversified business and one of the only companies with the ability to reach the world's animals. His work is focused on bringing new solutions that solve a number of global challenges through animals, including nutrition, mental health, and environmental sustainability. So welcome, Jeff.
Thanks.
And Ivo Landsbergen is a Dutch national who is Executive Vice President of Animal Nutrition and Health at DSM. Since he was named to that position in 2019, he's been transforming the animal nutrition business, enabling DSM nutritional products to reinforce its position as a leader of feed ingredients. Excuse me. As feed ingredients in the animal nutrition value chain. Today, the company is committed to leading a worldwide transformation in sustainable animal protein production anchored in DSM's food system commitments, including a double-digit reduction of on-farm livestock emissions by 2030. So welcome, Ivo.
Thank you.
So in case any of you didn't see it last night, there was kind of some big news that was the embargo lifted at 1 a.m., I guess, Eastern time. And so this is really exciting. Let's start by just sharing a little bit more on that. And Jeff, I'll start with you. And Ivo, please pitch in.
Well, first of all, thank you, everyone, to take time and be here today. I think we're talking about a very relevant topic. And, I think just to tie into one action that will be critical on the journey we're on is what we announced last night, which is really a global partnership, Elanco and DSM, two leading companies that have had a long history in feed, animal agriculture globally. And I would say recently in the last decade, both of us a common vision that, hey, sustainability is coming in as the next era of opportunity, the next era of need. It's the way to connect consumers, farmers, and the environment. So we've signed an alliance to where Elanco will license in the new technology a lot of you are aware of called Bovaer. And this will be a feed ingredient that will actually be used in cattle to reduce methane. And we know methane is a key factor if we're going to feed the world by 2030 and create a carbon neutral livestock operation. That will be absolutely critical. So we're excited about this. There's a lot of common values, common culture, And I will say, after an announcement like this, you always get to have a chance to have the customers and the cultures of your company respond. And I think both of us would agree there's a lot of excitement post the announcement internally in our companies as well as in the industry. So today embarks a new era, we believe, for animal agriculture to take on this environmental challenge.
Super. Ivo, you've already been working with this product in other countries, so tell us how you rolled that out initially and what this announcement today means to you.
Right, yeah. Yeah, thanks for that, and also thanks for everyone actually being here. It's absolutely an exciting day for Elanco, but also for DSM. This is for me a milestone in also just, again, the fight and the combat really against methane. But just paddling back a little bit, and this is really what makes me so extremely proud, is that it started actually in 2010. And I'm just pausing here for 1 second because I still remember I was in the United States in 2011 and actually bought my first iPad. That's how long it's been. And that's when we started actually the development of Bovaer. There were a few people in DSM, and I can't claim any kind of credits for this in any shape or form, but they saw that methane was one of the big and potential actually greenhouse gases actually developing, which need to be tackled. And then, of course, it takes a lot of perseverance, not just the idea, perseverance really just to tackle that. And then sitting here today, fast forward 12 years down the line, and then being able to actually announce such a deal is for me absolutely a proud moment, really, because it really takes perseverance and really making sure that you're going to tackle the things which need to get done. Sustainability, making animal farming truly sustainable is the topic here. Now, what's happening in other parts of the world since then, of course, a lot of work has been done, of course, R&D work, development work, making sure that, of course, the product is safe, but also is working well. And actually, lately, we've seen an acceleration because Brazil, Chile, we saw the approvals coming in. So it was absolutely exciting news last year. Hopefully, people have seen that. And actually, only a couple of weeks, months ago, actually, we saw EU 27 being actually approved as well, Australia as well. So we see a significant acceleration happening right now. There's a very strong interest in Bovaer to tackle exactly what we talk about, reducing methane emissions.
That's exciting to see that kind of an advancement and even an EU approval.
Yeah, exactly. So very proud, really, because typically it takes a bit longer, but okay, it happened. So yeah.
That's great. Yeah. Jeff, you've long talked about sustainability being this like next frontier of opportunity for animal agriculture. Talk to us a little bit about why.
Yeah, you know, I think the world is changing, right? We're living through once in a century, even more. You can't put a pandemic, a war, supply chain, inflation. This thing just continues. I said the other day to a group of employees, we won't ever experience this. And, you know, a quote I keep coming back to, it's not what happens to you, but it's how you respond. And I really believe this adversity that we have right now, the world showed through the pandemic they need protein. And when we saw this United Nations come last year with a summit saying, hey, maybe the just removal of livestock is the way to feed the world and not cool the climate, but mitigate the increase to the temperature in the climate. How do you do that? Absolutely, that's wrong. And let me just give a couple points, because this is, to me, the just of animals are at the crux of the two most important things, calorie and climate. I say, and cattle collide right in the middle of that. The world has spoke what they want. There's 300 million metric tons of animal protein consumed in the world today. It's grown 60 million metric tons the last 10 years. The next 10 years is predicted 90 million more metric tons. The world wants animal proteins, 40% of the protein consumed. So we're not going to eat our way out of this. And you cannot disconnect calories and climate. They are together. So we believe that, hey, and we're only 5% of the footprint of the greenhouse gas problem, but methane is higher. We're much higher, Sarah, as you know, on the debate. But we can address methane and really probably do more than any one industry to mitigate the increase of temperature and feed the world, and do that with technologies like Bovaer. The other thing I'll just say briefly is, you know, it's going to take global alliances. It's going to take collaboration. It's going to take regulatory bodies coming to the table to this, and we've spent some time here in Washington today talking about it, to actually look and say, hey, how does the regulatory arm also play at this in this environmental challenge? So to me, that's That's what this is about. We've worked very hard to not only work on our portfolio, we've got the first environmentally approved product with Experior, but I think more so is bringing tools, and DSM has done the same. We see the same thing. This is going to take analytics. We've launched with Dr. Sarah Place Uplook, which can help operations manage their footprint and actually bring it down. And then we've put seed money in a company that can actually, called Atheon, that can monetize, certify, and aggregate the data to help farmers actually get value. So we're putting together the integrated value chain to capture the value. This is a long-term bet that we're making strategically, and we believe as companies, there's a $1 to $2 billion methane reduction marketplace out there today. So this is a long-term journey, but to me, it's the next era of opportunity and value and economics for American and global animal agriculture.
I completely agree, actually, on that point. What you see happening now with a global population actually growing from, we are now, I think, on this planet around 7 billion people, predicted to go to 9.8 billion people. So it's about 40% increase. Then actually just having discussion on what you just mentioned, you're just cutting down on actually animal protein is probably not going to be the answer to feeding the world. You probably need more animal protein. But then the question is, of course, not at the expense of the planet. You got to do something. You got to come up with new innovations, and Bovaer taps into that. But also what you mentioned, coming up with other solutions, making it measurable. I think that's I think one of the elements you touch on. Atheon is the example for Milanko. DSM is working on Sustel, and it's all about actually making sure that farmers actually have a chance really to see what kind of environmental footprint do they have on the farm. There's too many times they read in the newspapers that they are the source of a problem. And then you go to that same farm and say, okay, so what is the output? No idea, because there's no measurement. We need to measure on the farm level, and then you can start actually acting on it.
Yep.
What get measured gets done. I think that's quite an important one. So there, I think tools like an Atheon, but also Sustel, do play a role. So that's what I see happening in this space. So I think very important developments, and that's only going to find traction because there's many companies, of course, also further down the value chain, and let's not forget about them either. We have farmers. We talk about farmers. Yeah, they are, I think, key. They're key really for the solution. They're not the problem really. I think they are the key to the solution itself. But down the value chain, FMCGs, quick service restaurants, they have a vested interest. They have a vested interest really to reduce the footprint, the emissions. So I think there will be a pull coming from the value chain on the farmers and helping them. So that's what I see happening.
Thank you. And I want to remind everyone, if you have a question, or for everybody who's online, if there are any questions, you can submit those. Colleen and Becky are going to relay those to me or to the group and at large if some come in. So please raise your hand so I can see you and call on you through any of this, because we do want this to really be a good dialogue. Ivo, as you looked at development of this, and it was an interesting comparison between when you got your iPad and the changes. So part of our discussion, of course, is what are some of the barriers on the pathway to this? Share with us a little bit about what you ran into during the development and how you were able to, I mean, this seems like such a great product that it would be easily accepted, but I'm guessing it wasn't quite as slick as you may have liked it to be. So tell us just about the pathway and your journey to getting this approved in so many other countries.
It was just absolutely a smooth ride, as you can imagine. That's why it took about 12 years. So, no. First of all, you have this discovery phase, and of course you try, of course, there's a lot of science actually behind it, but not everything actually works. So that's to start with. And then you start to zoom into a certain option of a certain solution. And then, of course, the trials actually got to start happening because we are a science-based company. You can't just go by one trial, two trials, and say, eradicate, it works. You got to really underpin it. And that's where the difficulty starts to come in. So different feed regimes. If you go to a cow or a ruminant's farm in Australia, it's going to be totally different than the one in Benelux or the one in the US or in Brazil. So also just getting a feeling for how that actually all tunes together. But even practical issues. We all talk about methane from exhibited by a cow. How do you measure that? So you need to put them in a chamber, you need to actually get these measurements done, etc. All that actually we went through over the last 12 years, and we did it actually in 50 or even more than 50 peer-reviewed studies to really prove that the solution we're talking about today, Bovaer, is indeed actually delivering these kind of these emission reductions. 30% in dairy, and even 50% or higher for beef beef ruminants. So I think that's pretty substantial. But that's been a long and hard journey. Not to say the least, of course, also on the regular pathway as well, because you have to deal with not only the EU, as you just hinted at, we also had to deal with Brazil. We're talking about all kind of other countries, so that also adds, of course, to some of the hurdles. But therefore, such a joy really see the momentum actually picking up right now.
Put that in context too. I mean, the whole decade, there's you look at the productivity we've had. You know, it's been great, but it's single digits. It's 8-10%. So we're bringing a technology that can now do 30 in dairy, 50 in beef. I mean, that's multiple decades of productivity relative to methane. I mean, I'm talking about methane reduction. So,
yeah. Just talk to us in general about why methane is so important as we look at the climate crisis.
Yeah, I'll maybe let the experts here, but it really became the COP26, right? I mean, this technology is highlighted. You talked about it, probably the lead summit, and it was pointed to as one of the top technologies, Bovaer, to have an impact by 2030 in the climate. And I mean, you've got a short-lived gas and a long one, with carbon being, the stock, and gas, it takes 1,000 years, and you've got methane that's 12. So you attack methane, you can have a faster impact by 2030 to reach some of the goals that the United Nations has.
Yeah, so and adding to that, it's about 28 times more potent actually than CO2. So we also actually talk about CO2 equivalents, but it's 28 times more potent than CO2 in itself from a global warming perspective. So going after methane actually will make a significant impact. And that's what we see now. And let's not forget actually animal farming is associated with about 20% of methane emissions globally. So if you tackle that, you make a huge inroad in tackling climate change.
Yeah. And available so many. Colleen's got a question from audience.
We have a question coming online from a dairy producer in California, asking if we will, as farmers, truly be able to see the carbon credit value from in this space. And Ivo, maybe you could speak to what you're seeing in terms of the value that it's creating as you're bringing the product to market around the world.
Yeah, very good question. Of course, yeah, US got to be, of course, dependent on the regulatory pathway and approvals. But I can actually speak also on behalf of what we see already happening in other countries. And there's actually a colleague of us, or actually another player actually in this room here as well, is Friesland Campina, a very large dairy company and a partner for DSM. And what Friesland Campina has done is they said, okay, we're going to bring products to market which are sustainable. And what they do is actually they compensate farmers for the use of Bovaer, so they can actually just make products and produce products which are more sustainable. And of course then truly live up to their commitments again. Commitments they made on SBTI, science-based targets. Yeah. So this is only helping them really to meet their commitments. So that's the way it's happening, for example, in Benelux. JBS is another good example, the way they go about it. So it's got to be dependent, of course. I can't really comment right now for the US because we're not quite there, but these are the kind of examples I see happening.
We know today, and I think there are, carbon neutral livestock operations that are close to it. There are dairy operations in the United States today making economic benefit equivalent or more than the protein that they sell, large ones. And so we can see the destination. Carbon neutral livestock farming can happen in this decade. It can happen to the majority in the next 2 decades. We can see that. There's a path to that. I think economic value first comes from the food chain that you just mentioned, kind of their scope 3 on ESG, which there's more and more incentives to do that. There's also what we're trying to do together as companies is to first get the measures on the dairy operation today. What is your carbon footprint, and being able to reduce it, and then being able to certify that reduction, and then you start to create a carbon market, and that's what Athean and these other tools are attempting to do. Those are the 2 ways to really, accelerate to economic value for the producer, and we believe it's there. I can say as a public company, without ESG movement, without metrics that show we are reducing our footprint and having a scope 3, there's a lot of investors 5 years from now that are investing in Elanco that will not continue to invest. I mean, you take a Larry Fink at BlackRock and others, this is a mandate by companies today, and there's economic value to do this.
Yep. And give a bit of a flavor, if you talk about CO2 pricing today, actually in Europe it's around 20, I don't know today's value, but that's the kind of value you got to think of, 70 euros per ton. So that's quite high. I think here in the US it's a little bit lower, actually it's more like $6 or $7 or in that range. But you can imagine, of course, that if it's going to go to these kind of ranges, then you talk about a totally different game. Actually, via Avian, for example, where you are able to actually go for a crediting system, that in itself actually then creates a whole different market.
You've both mentioned measurement quite often. Who is going to be responsible for defining what is actually a consistent measurement across geographies, across livestock systems? Even in the U.S., you know, we have so many different entities who are getting into the market, and the way that one measures may not be the way that another measures. And how do we get this consistency? Does it need to come from a government plan or a collaboration of industry players, or both? How do you see that?
Yeah,
talk to Europe.
Yeah, so what we've seen in Europe actually, and also for other territories, we are using an ISO certification actually, where that is going to be the standard. So it's more a certifying body actually, which takes the lead there. So not that everyone's going to come up with whatever standard they like to apply. That doesn't work like that. You got to just standardize it. Otherwise, you can't really compare numbers. So that's what we're doing. So it's an ISO certified tool, which then also then gives you that kind of certification, which is also auditable, of course, in itself. Just to make sure that whatever is being claimed is also indeed verifiable and also then claimable later on.
And so is there going to be a new industry of people who are out doing the audits and checking the measurement?
That I do expect, absolutely, yeah.
Mm-hmm. That'll be especially important in this country since the SEC announcement that you need to be able to certify your climate claims in order for your regulatory findings. I see that. Yeah. Any other questions from online, Colleen, or else?
You know, I would make one comment that I'm sure that I get asked a lot in these forums is, what about the consumer? And there's a lot of market research that I know our protein customers, farmers, and meat companies here in the U.S., but I think globally, an interesting trend, especially with beef, is, you know, those that are not continuing to increase consumption but decrease or walk away from beef, it's been most contributed to the impact they believe beef is having on the environment. So an announcement like today and being able to head towards beef operations being able to claim that they are reducing methane, they have a carbon neutral livestock operation, is going to be a way to me, take the value of beef to another level. And all meat, I believe. So this is an opportunity to me, different than other issues we've dealt with, whether that's antibiotics or animal well-being standards. You were on defense. I believe this is offense. This is an opportunity to say, hey, especially this next generation, that actually, I'm traveling with three people, and I think all three and myself, we're all on these protein-heavy diets. Right? I mean, so it's not just GDP that's driving this. It is also carbs are down and protein is up. And this next generation, we've got to win them back. And how we win them back is showing that we're responsible. We produce a great product, and farms are actually reducing greenhouse gases more than they're admitting. That's what a carbon neutral operation is.
And since you brought that up,
got to win the consumers back, I think, this next generation.
That's a really good point. Since you brought that up, what do you see as the regulatory pathway, though, to making that happen in the U.S.?
Yeah. First of all, we want to bring the regulatory bodies to the table. I mean, the current administration is very clear. We've been, working with them even today. I mean, this environmental agenda is on both sides of the aisle. It's very important to everybody. People see that agriculture's got to play. Animal agriculture can play a big role. And to me, this announcement in Bovaer is a catalyst to bring the regulatory body. They have to come to the table also with this, because this needs to be a holistic approach. So with that, then we are going to be looking at this, of course. We don't want to take any shortcuts relative to safety. We do want to look at, hey, we are the last major continent with cattle that does not have this product approved. So we do want to look at this and say, hey, we want to take the most accelerated path done the right way. And we're only hours into this, but we're planning to collaborate very closely with the regulatory bodies.
Super. Yeah. Did you want to add anything to that?
No, actually only one last comment from my end, not so much really about Bovaer, but really about sustainability in general. Because this is not about Bovaer. Bovaer in itself, I think, is a very important, you also already hinted at it. It goes much broader. It's not about methane, it's not about CO2 only, it's also about nitrogen, it's about phosphoric, it's about water usage, etc. And I think sustainability is here to stay. It's something we need to start cracking and start acknowledging. It's not a problem if you really start dealing with it. Yeah. And I think it will become a business driver. And today, with Bovaer, I think it's a very good example, but there will be many more to come, really. And that's really what I'm convinced of, that I got a question in the past, sustainability is social corporate responsibility. Yeah, it used to be 10 years ago. But now they go hand in glove, and it actually becomes a business driver. Not only a business driver, shareholders, our stakeholders, our employees are asking for it. So this is actually the value, what we're talking about. It goes way beyond methane reductions. This is about making animal farming truly sustainable, which actually has a big reflection on everyone.
And today's just my final comment to build on that is the greatest environmental focused people are farmers. They've understood this. They know about the land. Today is just another tool. It's a series of tools to enable them, but there is nobody that understands how to take care of the environment more than the American farmer, the global farmer, and we're accelerating that. So a call out to all of them. They've got this, and today is only about embodying them with more tools to be able to continue on the path that they're already on. And a real call out to DSM. There's a lot of companies that would give up, I can tell you, and we've even given up on technologies after 7 or 8 years. And a real call out to a great company, DSM, and we're excited for this partnership and taking this technology to the American cattle industry.
Likewise, Jeff, really much appreciated. Look forward to really working together here closely.
Great.
To bring this to success. Thank you.
Well, on that note, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you. Both. So, Constance, you're going to get your question in when you come up here next. So we're delighted to have a great panel here to reflect on some of the different discussion we've already had. Starting out, and if you'll come up when I call your name, Jim Mulhern, who's the president and CEO of the National Milk Producers Federation. Really, when you think about dairy in D.C., you think about Jim. And although it took me a little bit to recognize him because I hadn't seen him in 2 years when he wasn't on a Zoom call. And it's good to see you again, Jim. And 35 years, has it been that long?
It has been. I think you just called me old.
I know you started when you were 12.
I did, indeed.
So there's something to be that. And then Mike Thoren, if you come on up, Mike. He's president and CEO at Five Rivers Ranch Cattle Feeding. Been in the cattle industry a long time. Literally started his in a cattle feeding division at Continental Grain Company, worked his way up through a lot of different roles, and then became president and CEO at Conti Beef from 2003 through 5. So welcome, Mike, to join us today. Online, we're going to have a couple of guests, but I have one more here. Constance, come on back. Again, president and CEO of the National Milk Producers of the American Feed Industry Association.
That wouldn't be a bad gig either.
No.
There are days when I would trade you.
Yeah, that would be interesting. And then online we have Brett Reinford, who's the CEO and partner at Reinford Family Farms in Mifflintown, Pennsylvania. Fourth generation dairy farmer who works 1,400 acres and 800 dairy cows. His family's been a pioneer in making cow manure into renewable energy and also recycling food waste. So I can't wait to hear a little bit more about that. And then we hope to have Jason Clay. How about that? He's on. Jason, welcome as well. I knew he had a prior commitment that was running back to back with this, so I'm glad to have him here. He's Senior Vice President of Markets for the World Wildlife Fund and Executive Director of Markets Institute at WWF. He's launched their work on agriculture, livestock, aquaculture, finance, and reshaped a lot of their work with the private sector. During his distinguished career, he's been working on a family farm at USDA. He taught at Harvard and Yale, and he spent more than 35 years working in human rights and environmental organizations. So welcome to our virtual panelists as well as those here on the stage. To start out, I'd just like each of you to take a couple of minutes, and we'll do our folks here in person and then switch to those of you online. And just share a little bit about reflections of what you've heard so far and what your organizations, Constance, you had a chance to talk a little bit already, but reflect a little bit on what you've been hearing and the prospects for this exciting new product coming to market.
Well, I'll start, Sarah.
Yes.
On behalf of the nation's dairy farmers, so National Milk represents dairy farmers across the country who ship to the nation's dairy cooperatives. Most of the milk in the U.S. is processed, marketed and processed through cooperatives. So we represent the vast bulk of the nation's dairy farmers. And I will say personally, for me, this has been a 15-year journey, 15 years plus journey on sustainability in dairy, where we recognized these issues and potential challenges, which I'll talk about for a second, but bringing that to today, I think it's part of the reason today's meeting and what we just heard from Jeff and Ivo is so important, because it is about taking on this challenge of climate change and developing sustainable solutions to it. And we've been engaged in that for some time. What we need are the tools and the technologies and the innovation to help us get further along this path. As you know, dairy represents about 2% of total greenhouse gas emissions in the U.S., so it's not large, but it is not insignificant. What we do know is two things. One, part of our efforts to increase productivity, which Jeff referenced, has already helped us. In the 10-year period from 2007 to 2017, a gallon of milk produced in the United States produced 19% lower greenhouse gases, using 21% less land and a third less water than just in that 10-year period. It's because of the commitment of this industry to look for innovative solutions to these challenges and continue on this path of continuous improvement. We set a goal for the U.S. dairy industry. The 6 leading dairy organizations in this country set a goal to be greenhouse gas neutral by 2050, a goal that we know we can meet. The gaps are our technology and innovation. We're talking today about a key one of those that will help fill an important gap. The gaps are in policy. Constance mentioned, the need for regulatory modernization, but it also comes, Congress has a role. We need new funding for conservation programs, incentives for farmers, investment tax credits. The technology is out there. Some of it today is too expensive for farmers to adopt. So if we need incentives through conservation funding, through investment tax credits, we need carbon markets. All of that together is going to help us achieve these goals. Dairy has long been part of the sustainability solution. You think about what dairy is. It's farmers taking sunshine to grow crops, many of which, grass, corn, that humans can't even consume. They're taking that solar-produced product, feeding it to a cow, producing protein products for us to consume, and then recycling the manure from those cows back onto the land. Now we have larger farms, we have more manure. We need to deal with that in innovative ways. And we're doing it through methane digesters, which capture that manure, capture the methane they produce, creating green energy, which can be used to power homes and cars, transportation across the country and across the globe, frankly. And then we can address enteric methane, which is about 1/3 of the total greenhouse gas emissions from a dairy operation are enteric, cow-produced from the internal digestive system of a cow. Bovaer is a product that reducing that by 30%, that puts us a long ways down the road to addressing an important challenge we have. So this is a big day. This is a big announcement, and we're very excited about this product, and we need to get the policy process going so we can get it approved and get it in use for farmers across the country.
Absolutely. Mike, how about you, your perspective as in cattle feeding?
Well, thank you. I'm going to reference my comments to cattle feeding in the broader beef industry, so intensive and expansive as we talk about it and think through this. I think one of the points, as my colleague went through the improvements through the last decades here that we've seen in efficiency, the beef industry would have very similar numbers in those. And it's interesting to me, in those numbers came from technology, genetics, and some management improvement, but the big ones are going to be technology and genetics. Yeah. The technology wasn't billed as sustainable. It was billed as production, and therefore it was paid for from the productive side. Here is Bovaer, with my understanding, no production claims with it. It's going to be interesting as to how this rolls out. It's an exciting process, but the levers aren't the same for introduction that have propelled us in the past, and I think that's going to be very interesting as how that plays out and what opportunities. I think the point that's been made several times on this is the need for a baseline. We can't work and make big assumptions, big CapEx decisions off equations with high degrees of error in them and are non-demonstratable. We have to build the benchmarks and stuff. When we see that going on, our land grant institutions are working to that challenge today, but we need focus, and we first need to build the benchmarks and then the interactions. The next thing I've heard today was the audit and the third-party piece of this. That's an interesting, seems obvious, and most, oh yeah, you need somebody to audit it. I think when you think about the beef industry and its expansiveness, it gets very interesting because you have firms that have top lines of over $1 billion, large cattle feeders, down to the bulk or median of the industry with 50 or 60 head with top lines of 50 or 60,000. In the complexity, I guarantee the complexity on the audit on the 50 or 60 is equal to that of the large operation. So when you think about a third-party audit process, I don't know that it's going to work. I mean, I think it sets the standards, but it needs to be, in my sense, instrumentalized or instrumentation and stuff to do it and determine it and then go forward, because the system just can't support the back-end cost across the entire process. So that'd be my thoughts.
Thank you very much. Constance.
Yeah, so Sarah, talking from a feed industry, I latched on to what Jeff and Ivo were saying about providing solutions. And so, you know, when we talk about sustainability, particularly in the U.S., we have a great track record in sustainability. When you take a look at the advancements we've made, the innovations, the adoption of new practices. But looking at the challenges we have in front of us, we're going to have to put on our thinking cap, and we're going to have to work together across the industry. There's going to have to be some collaboration. It's going to have to be engaging some of those non-traditional partners. You know, I mean, it's great to see Jason on this panel because, you know, we're exploring opportunities to work with WWF to advance both their goals as well as those that align with the feed industry. So it's kind of a little bit of a different approach sometimes than what I think we've thought about historically. In the feed industry, we're really tackling, we're kind of that nexus. We feed all animals, we feed all livestock. So we're at that nexus of the crop producers and then going to the animal production, the livestock producers. So we're really seeing an opportunity to be able to capture the value of that's intrinsic in those feed products in achieving some of the sustainability goals out there. We've established the GFLI, the Global Feed LCA Institute, as an organization to be able to get an environmental profile and metrics and be able to be measurable, which I think also came up in the earlier conversation. How do we measure these goals and these gains? And until we get there, it's going to be very difficult to be able to demonstrate that we are producing these products sustainably. So that's one of the things that when we work with the Meat Institute, when we work with the dairy and the beef guys, and we're talking about all of this, how do we make that interconnectivity across the entire food supply chain, capture those metrics? That's what's exciting about being able to make label claims on a product like Bovaer. Because when they've got the research to back it up and a producer includes that in the animal diet, and there is that proven efficacy with that, then you can be able to capture those metrics. What does that feed additive mean? It means a 30% reduction. So that's some of what I heard earlier that got me very excited from the conversation, was just how, as a collaborative group of folks within the food and ag supply chain, telling the right story, giving the license to the consumer to feel good about eating animal protein and all the other micronutrients that are in animal products. I want to throw that in. It's not just protein. It gets to be pretty exciting when that comes together. As I said before in my earlier comment, Sarah, we've got to have that regulatory pathway to be able to get them to market. And
Absolutely.
that right now is our biggest limiting factor.
Brett, thanks for joining us from, it looks like perhaps your farm office in Pennsylvania. Welcome.
Well, good afternoon, Sarah. Thank you. I just wanted to, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, yes. All right. So I just wanted to give a little feedback on what I heard so far, and I almost jumped out of my chair when I heard Jeff say that farmers need more tools. And I was excited to hear that, and also excited to hear about this product, Bovaer. So this would be a tool that our farm would be interested in using to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. But it sounds like it's going to take some time to get it to market. And so, I think that if we're serious about reducing our greenhouse gas emissions, that when there's a tool like this available and working in other countries, that somehow we need to figure out how to streamline this and get it to market so that U.S. farms like ours can use it as well. The other thing I wanted to comment on, I think everyone on the panel had already mentioned this, was having a set of standards on knowing what kind of impact these tools would have on our farm, because our farm is definitely willing to make the investment into reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. We've done that over the years, but what is the standard and how is it going to be measured? We've done we're committed to doing the net zero initiative. We've done studies on our farm to see where we're at, and we're not quite there yet. And it seems like the numbers keep moving on us a little bit. And so it would be nice to have a set of standards that we can kind of take to the bank, if you will.
Well, thank you very much. And Jason, welcome to our discussion today. I'm not sure how much you had a chance to hear earlier, but we talked about the introduction of Bovaer, and you've already heard that a lot of groups are interested in working with World Wildlife Fund. So share some of your opening comments, please.
Well, let me just offer an observation. I think we're in the perfect storm right now. What I would call the three C's: COVID, climate change, and conflict. And you can take your pick. They're all having an impact on economies and on food and the global food system and on trade. Just on the conflict side, for every month that Russia stays in the Ukraine, we're probably going to see a year's worth of impact on markets. And so what does that mean for us now, already 3 months in? I think we need to really begin to look at that. I totally agree with a lot of what's been said. I think, to put it in context, since COP26 in Scotland, there's been a linking that seems to be quite tight now between a 1.5 degree future, depending on nature, and people leave it at that. But I think the real issue is that nature depends on where and how we produce food, probably more than any other single factor. And so food companies are beginning to realize that they not only have a role, but a responsibility to reduce those impacts. And those are absolute reductions, not just efficiency gains. We need to shrink the whole footprint, not just the per kilo or per hundredweight of milk or whatever. The issue of measurement is really important. There are no standard LCAs. They're all different, and they can come up with very different results. And you've got apples and oranges. We can't have a system that's based on apples and oranges. We don't want fruit salad. We want reductions. And so I think that's going to be really important. And then common reporting. And it would be great, actually, if we had a cloud-based system where people could report once, whether you're a producer or a buyer, and you could access that information and get it. But that means we need standardized reporting, standardized measurements, and a better understanding of those issues. The other real problem, I think, is that all of the science-based targets analysis and data around greenhouse gas emissions and Scope 3 emissions are based on averages. Now, I know Lake Wobegon is talking about everybody above average. But I don't think everybody is actually above average. I think we've got a bunch of producers that are below average, and they have different needs for improvement. And we need to see government programs begin to address that. we're not going to get a whole lot of new money into the system. So how can we pivot some of the government programs from maintaining what we have always had to kind of helping support the transition to what we need, and in terms of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and these exact types of inputs that we're talking about. But companies need to step up as well through long-term contracts and through partnerships and helping producers get access to credit for making the investments that are needed to become more sustainable, to reduce production, et cetera. We need producers and people along value chains to start sharing knowledge, because that's the way we're going to improve faster. With climate change, we don't have centuries to get better. We have years. And so I think it's going to be very important to address that issue as well. So let me just throw it open with those few things. And I followed this technology. I think it is a great way to address about 1/3 of the issue with cattle. Okay, so we've got enteric fermentation, we've got manure management, and we've got the feed ingredients. So those are not quite equal. It varies a little bit depending on where you are. And that works for cattle, but for a lot of other animal proteins, it's about the manure and the feed ingredients and the management. So how do we have more closed loop, nutrient cycling? How can we start using manure management to generate NP and K and generate liquid ammonia, not just renewable natural gas and those kinds of things? Can we get Yara or Mosaic or some of those companies to have long-term contracts with producers who want to invest in a biogas digester, but also the technology to capture the nutrients as well? Then you could have a decentralized system for nutrients. These kind of things I think we need to start doing more of.
Thanks, Jason. That's some great way to get us started here in thinking on some challenges ahead. Brett, I wanted to turn back to you for a little bit, because you've done so much with sustainable practices on your actual farm operation, and as we were talking a little bit about the role of government in this, have you used NRCS programs at all and technical advice from them, or do you use your co-op, or where are you seeing this opportunity to advance and getting that technical advice and financing to do it?
Yeah, good question. So we use anybody that's helpful. And actually the NRCS has been one of the most helpful in this. And our local NRCS here in our county is very aggressive in making me aware of different opportunities to help our farm be a little bit more sustainable. And we have a couple of, we use state grant money as well, and also federal money through NRCS, but we also have a couple private partnerships as well through certain groups that have also given us money as well. So we try to put our ears to the road and listen to who's out there that's willing to help, and usually make a couple phone calls or emails, and then we take it from there.
Thank you. So one of the things we often hear at USDA is, they're way overbooked for conservation programs and assistance, especially like the Environmental Quality Incentives Program or EQIP. They're underfunded, and they don't have the staffing because they're going through a lot of that generational change, as well as the fact that they have the need for more people. So I think the last number I heard was about 1,000 people behind in their hiring. Jim, what are you hearing in terms of the ability for at least our USDA to be able to assist as we look for this transformation into more sustainable practices?
Well, I'll pick up on a couple of comments. Jason's comments about funding, that's going to be critically important. We're going to have that. And we've worked very closely with Senator Stabenow to put forward more funding for climate smart agriculture, conservation funding. NRCS has some programs that work for dairy, but frankly, a lot of these programs are not designed, were not designed, and historically have not worked as well for dairy farmers. So we've been working closely to get new funding and get these programs evolved to better address dairy's issues. $27 billion was in Senator Stabenow's package, trying to get that funding before the Farm Bill, because it's going to be a challenge. I mean, Jason's point, it'll be hard to add that kind of funding if we wait till the Farm Bill, trying to get that ahead of it. That's the process we're going to need, but it's going to require more than federal funding. We do need market incentives. The question from the California dairy farmer on carbon markets is key. A product like Bovaer, farmers will use it to reduce that methane production, but there has to be a value for them to reduce it that needs to get paid. So a carbon market will enable us to do that. One of the beauties of dairy is that the reductions in dairy are not modeled reductions. You know, so much of the greenhouse gas carbon reductions we model these. Some of the soil sequestration stuff is based on modeling. With dairy, to Ivo's point earlier, you take a cow and you measure in a chamber, you capture the methane gas that is being emitted in cow burps, and you can get that exact quantity, and then you can track how much you've reduced by using a product like Bovaer. The same with an anaerobic digester. You create that condition, you trap the methane gas in the digester, use that to power a generator or scrub it to create a renewable natural gas. You can measure, monitor all of that, which makes these kind of processes high quality for carbon market payments. But it's going to take that kind of market assistance, market intervention, to bring all of this into reality. We can do it, but the barriers right now are financial, there are policy gaps, and there are technology and innovation. And we're seeing today a new technology. We need to incent more of that.
Mm-hmm. Constance, I know you want to add, and I want to remind everybody, if there's a question, or from those of you who are online, please get those in so we can include you as well. Constance?
I completely agree with what Jim just said, but one other thing that also needs to be adjusted and recognized is that the programs that farmers could receive cost share dollars for under EQIP or CSP also have to be modernized and keep up with the tools that are out there. Right now, iFeeder is working with the Nature Conservancy and with the Dairy Innovation Center to take a look at feed ingredients that can actually help in this area that would be able to be listed as a practice that could receive cost share dollars. So we've got to make sure that we keep up with those programs as well, and the things that are available to farmers, and it would be exciting to be able to see them get some cost share dollars to help them make the hurdle in the transition to utilizing some of these tools.
Yeah. So you both mentioned the Build Back Better package that Senator Stabenow, the chairwoman of the Senate Ag Committee, had proposed, but as of last time I checked, it's not going anywhere fast. Now, maybe a smaller version still has a small chance. Yeah. But Jason, back to you for a second. Where do you see any additional government funding come from, if at all? Oh, we lost some audio here.
Not so much the government funding new funding, but it's trying to figure out how to repurpose funding or how to use it better and leverage it more. One thing that when I talk to producers, not just dairy producers, but others that are trying to access funding, they often find that they have a problem with their local financial institution that doesn't know how to access it, doesn't know what they need to do. If there were training courses for bank officials in this, that could really actually help very, very quickly. I think there are ways that companies working with producers on long-term contracts or with co-ops on long-term contracts producers or co-ops could use that as an asset to go in and borrow money against that. And that could be used to leverage government funding. I think we've got to figure out how to get the incentives aligned so that the private sector and producers and government are working together to solve these problems more rather than each having their own one-off kind of strategies and approaches, at least where we can.
Mike, how about you in terms of sustainability with your operation? It's unique. I mean, and you were talking even more broadly about the beef industry as a whole. What do you see as a challenge for implementing more sustainable practices?
This has been a fascinating conversation, and in speaking with World Wildlife Fund there, the challenge in repurposing governance and stuff, because I'm sitting there thinking it's top line. We need something to pull the dollars. There's technologies that this company has that have been around 50 years that if there was motivation or financial incentive could be taken to the expansive industry and make big differences today and stuff. And the issue is they couldn't carry the water from a production standpoint, but levering on a payment for sustainability and how to bring that. And when I sit here and I'm listening and reflecting through this conversation, and then we're looking to the government, but in the end, it's the consumer that are getting the benefit of it, and it's got to come through at some point. And I get the government's a form of we, but I mean, in the issue, this isn't an obligation of a farmer. It's an opportunity for the farmer to supply what we as society needs, and we need to make certain we're clear about that. Their obligation is 1 out of 340 million in the United States for the deals. It's not their comparative footprint on their production side. We're all in this together, and how to get it paid for is the issue. This can all work if we can figure out how to monetize it, and it's for all of us.
Yeah. Colleen, a question from the audience?
Yeah, a question coming in online for our producers in terms of Scope 3. You mentioned the SEC Scope 3. Curious what you're hearing from your where you sell your products into about Scope 3 and what you're being asked from your supply chain.
On Scope 3, we're hearing a lot. Here's the reality today, folks. There's less governmental regulation on greenhouse gas, climate change, than there is marketplace regulation. Right. We hear it all the time from our customers. We're very close to our customers. 4, 5, 6, probably a dozen of our major national, international customers in dairy have set very ambitious climate goals by 2030. That's 7 years from now. Nestle has set a goal to reduce theirs by 2025 by a fairly large percentage. So 30 to 50% reductions in their Scope 3 emissions by 2030. We're a big part of those Scope 3 emissions, and that's the dairy supply chain. So yes, we're hearing about it a lot. There is a lot of interest, and that's part of the reason that we are so focused on this. We know we can get there, and we're making great progress in it. It does have a cost, and that's why I keep hammering the need for financial incentives, the need for new policies, and the need for new technology and innovation. Just one example, methane digesters. We have about less than 400 digesters across agriculture today. Now that has doubled in the last 10 years, more than doubled in the last 10 years. But there are probably 9,000 farms across the country that could today have the scale to deploy a methane digester. Financing is a big part of the limit there. And as the technology expands, that 9,000, say, farms today, most of which are dairy, but there's other operations, there's hog operations, there's chicken operations, and others. As the technology expands, it's going to be more affordable for smaller operations. So this is all about, we can solve this challenge. It's not impossible at all. The science is there. Funding is probably the biggest obstacle.
Mike and Brett, do you want to chime in here on any of the thoughts? Oh,
I just want to build on Jim's question and tie it to Mike's. You take a Nestle that is willing to pay.
She's bringing you the mic.
Sorry.
Just got to make sure we get our online folks so they can hear.
So just to build on that, because I think Mike's point is a powerful one. This has to come from, in capital markets, economics have to come from sustainable sources. Mm-hmm. So if a Nestle, I'm going to use, or any company you can put in there that is saying, hey, I want to hit this goal by 2025, are they contributing anything to that supply chain? That's my question. Are they getting anything more for their product that then they're passing through the value chain to say, hey, we can help you, dairy producer, help us get to this 2025 goal? Is there any signal of that?
Right now what they're doing, Jeff, is we are working with Nestle on some pilot projects. They're funding efforts to try to help us get there. We've got a very strong collaboration with Nestle, with Starbucks, and other companies to try to move us along this pathway. The issue of, is there a marketplace premium for this, I think that remains to be seen. I think for some early movers, there may be, but our experience in dairy is that over time, those premiums disappear. So that's why we're approaching this as a full value chain proposition and trying to address the issues really in a pre-competitive standpoint. So that it doesn't become, buy this milk because it is, carbon neutral or greener than this milk. We're trying to get the entire industry there. That's been our focus, and we know we can do that.
But he does bring up a great concern, and I hear this from farmers all the time, in that, so the commitments have been made, and the farmers don't feel like they're going to be properly incentivized as their share of that. So, Mike?
I think that's completely accurate in the beef industry. And you think about the beef chain, it's longer and more segments in it and stuff. And I've heard certain processors make claims they're going to be carbon neutral by whatever. Somebody's next year earlier, they beat them, and everybody's, well, how are they going to do that? And then you sit there and look at it, and it's Bovaer, maybe the first answer that's came since all of this rhetoric has started, that's given an answer, is one lever that can get there. I think as you take this down through into the cow-calf industry, that's the powerhouse of the whole thing, they will not be told to do anything for a packer. They're not going to listen. They're not going to take it. I mean, it's got to come with incentive. They're not very keen on the switch, especially with the packer. And it's just very interesting. The packer's making the claims in our segment, but it's got to be actualized at the cow-calf level. And it's going to be very interesting to see. I don't have the answers. I can just see this is going to be interesting.
Well, as we've seen play out this week, there's a lot of differences of opinion even within the cow-calf folks. So seen a lot of that. Brett, how about from you? Are incentives from the folks throughout your chain? Land Lakes?
Yeah, no, I'm glad it was brought up. So we have partnered with Land Lakes and the Hershey Company on a project here that we're working on this fall. So we're starting to see those corporate companies like Hershey and Nestle's. We've had conversations with Nestle's about selling some of our renewable energy credits to them to reduce their GHG. So yeah, you're starting to see that, and I think that's a more sustainable way of funding these projects than these grants that come and go. And so we're excited to see the more corporate involvement in these type of sustainable projects.
Sarah, I'd also want to add, though, from the feed perspective, two things that we really haven't touched on, and that is when enteric or methane is not emitted, then when methane is emitted, we're also losing a lot of energy. And last time I checked, farmers don't like to lose energy. So when we can also have a better idea about what does that energy retention mean to efficiency and gain, we may find that there are some financial benefits to the producer of being able to keep that energy working for that animal rather than losing it in the form of methane. And the other thing I would also point out is some of this may all be moot, because right now we're looking at lenders looking at a producer's sustainability or ESG profile, companies' ESG. I mean, we're seeing this in the feed industry when they're talking about operating loans or capital loans. So, I mean, this is being driven by a lot of places. It's being driven by CPG companies, but it's also being driven by the lenders and their willingness to actually give money to the sector.
Yeah. Jason, as you collaborate and serve as a consultant with a lot of different, not only NGOs, but different industry groups, what do you see as kind of the platform to advance all of these things moving forward? I mean, is there a convening that's going on behind the scenes where people are saying, here's the checklist and here's how we're going to move forward? Or is there anything organized that is looking at a quicker timeline of advancing some of these initiatives you discussed?
You know, it's funny. I think my general answer to you is maybe going to be a surprise, but I think we all have to get more comfortable, and hopefully COVID has taught us how to do that, with science that is not complete. We dealt with a situation with COVID where we didn't have good science. We didn't know what was happening, and we developed vaccines and we got people vaccinated, and we may disagree about the impacts or whatever, but we didn't wait around for the perfect data. With climate change and some of these other issues that we're talking about, we have to do the same thing. And I think that's true with, estimates of greenhouse gas emissions. they're probably going to be bigger in the end when we find out what they actually are than we think they are today. But we've got to get started. We've got to build the plane while we fly it. And I do think that long-term contracts that can serve as an asset, but also begin to maybe provide floor pricing. And some of these contracts that I'm hearing about with companies are 15 years. So it's not insignificant. With Yara, what they're looking at in those same pilots that you mentioned is nutrient offtake of 15 to 20 years guaranteed, which just is something that a producer can use to go and borrow the money. It's an asset. It's in itself, it's worthwhile. But we've got to figure out how to cover these actual costs at the production level, because without that, all these things just become externalities that either are passed on to the farmer or passed on to the planet. And either way is not going to be a satisfactory outcome.
So, Jim, toss that over to you, too. The dairy industry all gets together and talks on a lot of different things. You represent a broad swath of the industry, but what about between dairy and beef, and what about between dairy and worldwide? I mean, are those collaborations starting to take place? Or
they've actually been going on for some time. Jason and I met, 13, 14, 15 years ago, Jason. We started the collaboration with the Innovation Center for U.S. Dairy and World Wildlife Fund. They've been a close partner for a long time. And that's grown over time. We work closely with a lot of agricultural colleagues. The beef industry, we're doing joint work together. And of course, the Food and Ag Climate Alliance is a great collaboration of not only agriculture, but environmental organizations as well, working together on this broad agenda of issues that Jason just talked about. I couldn't agree more with his comments. So yeah, there's a lot of collaboration, a lot of folks focused on not complaining about the problem, but solving the problem and trying to work towards solutions. So I do feel very, very positive, very bullish. And this, to come and bring it back to today, it's singles and doubles like this that get us around the bases to score. Using a baseball metaphor, we're in that season now, so I can do that.
Go Nats. So Mike, just back to you for a second. When you look at trying to advance, again, sustainability goals, if you could name your kind of top 3 concerns that come to mind and of the challenges you had ahead, what would those be? What surface is near the top for you?
I think the challenges, first off, is the first easy one to get to is the measurement and the identification of the baseline. That we can get done. That's going to take time and commitment, but we will get it done as a society. We're doing it. I mean, I'll make a plug for CSU Ag Next. It's a group of, it's a center in the CSU Animal Science and Vet School to study specifically the sustainability issues around beef cattle, dairy cattle, and sheep in the deal. And that's grown to be a multi-university effort. I think Texas Tech and A&M, Arkansas, Kansas State, Washington State, and Nebraska, and with everybody with very specific roles to play to move this quickly. And I think that's the thing, is time, the clock's ticking. We've got to get this answered. Society's not going to be patient. We've got to get this done and moving. So I think forcing this land grant system of a strong tradition of independence to work collaboratively is an interesting issue, but they're engaging in it and moving. So that's the next one. The monetizing this and how to finance it. We've talked a lot about it, and I don't feel good about that today. I mean, it needs to happen. How's it going to happen? I think we can have good one-offs with companies that, in shorter value chains where it's easy to pull through. Longer, more complex ones, it gets interesting as to how to monetize it. And then I think the next one that we haven't talked about is this a societal ask? And I'm not sure society understands what they're asking for. So as they roll back the cover and see it, how does this shift and move and all these things? Because once we start, I mean, I believe in we're going to build a plane while we're flying it, but we're getting airborne on this, and we've got to keep going. And it's not start over. I mean, we're going to have to make a lot of adjustments as we're along the way, but we're going to have to get on a trip and get moving. And society's got to stand there with us as we do it. This is not just we'll do it and it'll all be great. They've got to partner and understand.
Constance, you know from your prior role that consumers can be quite fickle at times, that they say they want certain things and they get to the grocery store and then they see the price tag and perhaps are not willing to pay for such a premium. How do you see this playing out on the consumer level with the CPG companies?
Yeah, well, I think when we take a look at what consumers have been doing is they've been trying to buy food that reflects their values by purchasing a lot of these products with absence labels. And they're doing that because they don't have anything better to judge. And so I think it's really important that as an industry, we come together, we work with the CPG companies to be able to get those products to the consumer and labeled and characterized in a way that consumers can feel good about what they're buying. And that applies to the consumers that are buying those high-priced food items, as well as the ones that are price-conscious consumers. There's still that interest in that. But I don't ever want to let anybody slip when it comes to consumers. I've been to countries where people don't have enough to eat, and it's very scary. And if you haven't been there, go, because nothing will make you more committed to productivity and making sure that we're delivering good product to consumers at a price that they can afford. But that doesn't mean that it can't be sustainable too. But we've got to find a way of being able to articulate the values that are in that food product. We've got to find a way to be able to share that with consumers in a way that makes sense, in a way that's accurate, and in a way that doesn't mislead consumers about what they're really buying.
So, Brett, do you see that there'll be cartons of milk coming out there to have a barcode from your dairy, and somebody will scan it, and they'll be able to see all your sustainability practices? Or how does this the future look like for you?
You know, that's a good question. So we market our milk to the Land O'Lakes, and they have put an immense amount of effort into educating the farmers that belong to the co-op about how to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions, and they're marketing that to the consumer, and they're doing a good job. Do I see a barcode on a milk jug? Maybe not, but I think in a lot of the marketing, there will be a huge emphasis on talking about what farmers are doing to be more sustainable, and Land O'Lakes doing a wonderful job at that.
And by the way, there's a great article about him online and all the great things that you've done, not only with your methane digester for the dairy operation, but for food waste, which is another part of your sustainable solutions, right?
Yes, no, that's our claim to fame, I guess. I think we've recycled probably over 150,000 tons, not 150, 150,000 tons of food waste in the last 13 years. So we've made that part of our farm business here, and we enjoy telling that story about us being more sustainable, and other farms across the United States that can do that. I think, Jim, you mentioned that over 9,000 farms could have digesters, so it's a story that many other farms could tell if the funding was available and the economics made sense. So,
thank you, Jason. I'm going to let you have the last word on the panel here for advice that you might offer. We've got a lot of great thinkers here in this room, and folks that are very engaged in the political process. So. As we exit this discussion, what would be 2 or 3 things that you might offer as advice for folks going forward?
So I think we've had a discussion about data, and I think it certainly drives decisions. But what we haven't really discussed yet is the need to share the information that you get when you use that data to make a decision. How did that work? What strategy worked better? Under what conditions? What business models work better? What practices work better? We often agree on a problem. We all go off and do our separate things, and then we never share the data to allow all of us to get better over time. So that's the first thing. The second is we really do need new markets. I love the idea of blended inputs going into biogas digesters. You can actually take waste from communities and put it through your biogas digesters and recycle all those nutrients. But I think we also need markets for water and soil and carbon and nature, how to take marginal land out and produce something more valuable than erosion. I think there are things that we should be doing that we haven't really started yet. And we've got to find companies that are willing to be on this journey. It can't all be cash up front, but long-term contracts are a form of collateral. That can work as well. That can leverage other things. Companies need to get invested in their supply chains if they want them to be more resilient.
Thank you. And I'd like you to have me join me in thanking our panelists, both online and here, for a great discussion today. Thank you. And thanks for all of you for participating, both here in the room as well as everybody online. You know, there were so many good comments made today. I didn't get all the notes, but I think I'll be able to maybe rewatch this video a little later. And certainly it's something that we at AgriPulse are going to continue to be writing about and following. A couple of words, if we had a word cloud of some of the discussion, I think I heard the word measurement come up probably more than anything else, and the need for consistency. And that's certainly something that we see, so that we don't have, like Jason said, you know, apples and oranges, and we don't need a fruit salad. I also heard a lot about the need for more collaboration and communication about what is being done, what works, what doesn't work, what can be advanced, you know, around the world in terms of best practices. Underlying some of these themes, of course, is the need for continued research and investment in a lot of different areas. And it probably is not going to all come from the government. If any new funding comes from the government, we'll be surprised at least this year. But it can be something that can occur all along the supply chain with incentives, starting with some of the companies who have made these Scope 3 commitments and are pushing that all the way through the rest of the supply chain. So a wonderful discussion. Thank you for joining me as a moderator, and look forward to having continued discussions in the time ahead. You have a quick comment?
One thing.
Can you wait for a... Oh, wait for the microphone, please. She's coming.
I'm Andre Bos from DSM, and I brought a happy cow with me. We talked about cows.
We always like happy cows.
I heard about the farms, and I work in Switzerland. I'm Dutch, and this is from the Cow Parade, and it's a Swiss guy who designed cows, right? And when we got our approval from Bovaer, we asked the kids of our employees to make a picture about Bovaer, what they thought about sustainability, about reduction of methane. And by the way, it was a daughter of an American employee who won the prize. And we made a lot of those cows, which is one of the first. And the picture of that of what that girl made is on the cow. And I want to hand it over to Jeff. Yeah.
Well, you should come up here so we can get it on camera, and you got to open the box.
You get to open the box.
You have to open the box.
Because we talk so much about the problem, but the cows are not a problem; they are the solution. That's what you always said, right? So that's what it is. So I brought it all the way from Switzerland for you, and it's a start of our collaboration.
All right, very good. Well, thank you. It's fragile.
And it came out not broken, so that was already. It came out not broken. That was already a trick.
Wow,
yeah, that's what it is.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And I'd like to point out that I realize not all cows are black and white, and I was going to say, and neither should the regs be, but this is what not all cows are black and white.
Nails, look at that. Yeah. Very nice.
Okay.
Well, thank you. I think a good symbol of good collaboration here. So thank you. Thanks to the panel. Thank you, Jim. Right.
Thank you. All right. I appreciate you guys.